What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Thank you so much for joining us, for giving us the most precious thing you have, your time. So we try to do what we always do, turn down the noise of the news cycle, get to the things that really matter and some good information so that we can properly discern the times we live in. And it's really important to turn down the noise because we have nothing but noise in the news cycle right now. Everybody's freaking out. We had a presidential debate. Everybody freaked out. We've had some Supreme Court decisions, some really important Supreme Court decisions. Everybody's freaking out. Should Biden drop out of the presidential race? Everybody's freaking out. Is Trump going to be sentenced? Is he going to have more trials? How does the Supreme Court deal with all his various things that are going on? And how does that affect the campaign? How does that affect the election? Everybody freaking out. The best thing you can do, usually, when everybody, or at least the perception of everybody, we don't want to broad brush too much, when most people are going in a herd one way, you probably just want to step back out of the herd and at least try to see what's going on. It's hard, though, when you're in a stampede of people all running one direction, or your social media feeds all going one direction, or everybody in the news cycle is all saying the same thing and going one direction. It's really hard to find out what's actually going on and kind of step back. That's what we try to do here. That's why we don't do a lot of instant reaction or instant review of stuff. One is I'm lazy, but two is you don't really know. You need to give it a day or two. You need to step back for a minute. You need to wait and kind of get a little perspective on it. We talk about the 24-hour rule, a big event like a mass shooting or a tragedy or a massive natural disaster. Whatever those first reports are, they're usually wrong. 24-hour rule, wait and see what happens. We've especially seen this with things like shootings, who the suspects might be, things like this. We kind of got to do that with some of this now, too, because, look, I watched the presidential debate. It was horrific. It was hard to watch. It was very hard to watch. It was hard to not just get up and turn the TV off. You just wanted to reach through the TV and turn it off and make it stop because it was terrible to watch President Biden struggle like that. Things like the Supreme Court. Folks, and by the way, I did it, so I'm not telling you to do anything I didn't do. You can go to ordinary-times.com. Before I opined on those big rulings, especially things like the Trump immunity ruling, I sat down and read it. I know people make fun of me for this online. Even some of our lawyer friends make fun of us online for this. But yes, it's important for you to actually read the decision and not just go off half-cocked, because Supreme Court decisions especially have layers to them. They have nuances. A lot of them are big-ticket items, but what they're actually ruling on is very, very narrow. And in a lot of cases, like the immunity case, it's not the end of the story because it's going to go to a lower case. There's going to be more litigation. It's going to come back up to the Supreme Court again. It's going to get refined down even more. Things like Roe v. Wade. Yeah, that was a big thing when Roe v. Wade went down. It went down back down to the states. It's going to all get litigated through. And at some point, a lot of these issues are going to wind up right back at the Supreme Court again. Who knows what the makeup of the court is when those things matriculate back up, though. So the thing to all of this is, though, is if everybody's freaking out, the best thing you can do, number one, no matter what the subject matter of the freakout is don't freak out. Take a step back and see what's actually going on with it. We don't have a lot of that in the news cycle right now. Now we're getting ready to have a holiday weekend, so things will cool off a little bit. Trump's sentencing for next week has been pushed back. So we're just going to get all Biden and is he fit for president and whatever Trump's doing all the time for the next couple of weeks until we get into the conventions. The convention coverage is going to be pretty predictable as far as the big ticket items. Now I'm watching for things like protests. I'm watching for things like how the Donald Trump folks are actually going to structure the RNC. The Biden people obviously have their hands full trying to structure how they're going to do the DNC. Having a DNC in Chicago with threats of very intense protests seems like a really bad idea. We'll see how that goes. These things are going to be important to watch. But between now and then, it doesn't look like with the Trump stuff getting pushed back a little bit, there's not going to be a lot of other news going on as far as the presidential stuff goes outside of those two guys. So here's the narratives we're dealing with. Is Joe Biden too old to be president? He is, by the way, but he is president. And is Donald Trump too crazy, unserious, criminal, whatever term you want to use, to be president? Joe Biden, this is just the truth, folks. I'm sorry if it upsets people, but not really, because this is the truth. Joe Biden is president of the United States because he is not Donald Trump. The electorate and the decision before them in 2020 was Trump or not Trump, and they took Joe Biden as the alternative to Trump. The reason everybody freaked out so much over that debate performance is it hit the central nerve of what Biden's entire reason for being president was. He's not Trump. He's a viable alternative to Trump. The non-Trump vote that went for Biden is on a spectrum. There's people who are just mildly annoyed by Trump and didn't like him for various reasons, to people who outright think he's all four of the horsemen of the apocalypse is going to bring about the end of times for all people for all time. Wherever you fall on that spectrum, you weren't going to vote for Donald Trump. Biden's problems are actually not just losing votes to Trump, because even with all this going on, Trump isn't getting more popular. He's not gaining support from any of this. Underneath the really cringy, hard to watch stuff that President Biden did in that debate, where he just lost his train of thought, said nonsensical things like we beat Medicare, made really outrageous and offensive claims like no servicemen had died under his watch, which was just, I was about ready to throw something at the TV at that one. And you couldn't get to all the stuff that Trump was saying and the ridiculous things he said and his Gift Gallop method of debating, where he just fire hoses so much nonsense you can't keep up with it. All of that hits the core nerve that really damages Biden in this election, which is his argument to be the electorate's decision over Trump is still, I'm not Trump. But everybody on that spectrum of not voting for Trump, from the mildly anti-Trump to the vehemently anti-Trump, that decision is going to start sliding on a ratio scale based on who Joe Biden is. And the folks who think he's not fit for office, he's too old, he's losing his faculties, however they want to phrase that, that ratio is now moving, and we've got proof it's moving. Now, it may move back some as this campaign goes on. We still got a long way to go. I was talking to somebody just today privately, which, you know, again, folks, I don't just jump in front of this microphone. If I'm talking about Congress, I've talked to some people that cover Congress. I've talked to some people in D.C. I try to find out what's actually going on. I'm not just rambling off. Doesn't mean I'm always wrong, but I do try to be informed. I was just talking to somebody who believes the exact opposite of me about a lot of presidential politics stuff privately. And we were just hashing this out back and forth. Iron sharpens iron, right? I talk to people I don't agree with all the time to see where I'm at and see what I'm thinking and to develop my own opinions on things. And something we both agreed on, although we are diametrically opposed on a lot of issues. What's really hurting Biden is just being not Trump isn't good enough anymore. And when you see something visceral like, I don't want to see my president on TV, Joe Biden the man or Joe Biden the president on TV in that state ever, ever, ever again, and I don't, that goes way beyond politics and way beyond policy. We've got some polling out from the New York Times now. The numbers have moved. Likely voters, Biden is losing to Trump by 6 points now. Registered voters, he's losing to Trump by 8 points now. That's a definitive swing. That's real movement. Now that, again, there's other stuff that can happen. Never discount Trump from doing something really, really crazy. But I think this was put really well by Luis Mendez. He wrote a piece in ordinary-times.com. I greatly encourage you to read it for a couple of reasons. One is Lewis used to do a lot of political stuff, but he stopped. He hadn't done political pieces about 4 years. He's like, I don't like politics. He went off and became a film critic. Really good one. He's been on this program many times. We talk movies with him. But he's really good with data and numbers, and he lets the data and numbers inform his opinion. He'll even tell you, like, I don't like this, but this is what the data shows you. So he wrote his first piece about politics in over 4 years, put it up at ordinary-times.com. I recommend you read it. And this is a piece I shared with a couple people, just privately, like DM'd it to them, sent them links like, hey, you need to read this. And he goes through a lot of data. One thing I appreciated Lewis, he's got all the charts. He's got all this data. He brings nice pictures. He brings the math, but he puts it in a way that even I can understand it, right? And he lays out his reasonings for why he thinks Biden is in real trouble here. And I'm going to paraphrase him a little bit, but I want to tell you and read you verbatim his conclusion here, because I think he's really hitting something clear here. This is quoting Luis Mendez. We'll link to the piece, ordinary-times.com. While I'm sympathetic to arguments Biden can still turn this around, I hope the evidence I've presented in this piece at the very least helps you understand why there's a strong argument that Trump needs to start being treated as the clear favorite in the race. As much history as Biden is fighting against, his margin of error for a comeback is larger now than it will be the closer we get to Election Day if these trends in favor of Trump don't start to change. The clock is ticking, and before you know it, the conventions will come and go, Labor Day will arrive, mail-in ballots go out, and Election Day will be here. If you truly believe Biden can still win this, the sooner he starts getting momentum, the better. If my early inkling, this is Luis Mendez, of a Trump victory in November proves wrong, I give President Biden all the justification to print this piece out and hold it up as his victory rally, the same way President Truman held up the Chicago Tribune's Dewey Wins headline when he won. Not just because I would rightfully have to eat the crow, but because if he somehow does win, he'd pull off what I believe would be a historic comeback of the likes that would overshadow even Truman's. In another part of this piece, he said, look, it's not that Biden can't win. It's just that he's now in a position where it would be almost a black swan, once-in-a-lifetime thing that he could win. It would be that much of a comeback because everything is going against him now. So turn down the freak out over the debate performance and the various things about Biden and just step back for a second. We already knew President Biden was very old. We've already had evidence that his faculties was slipping because we can watch the debates from the Obama era when he was a VP. We can watch the debate from 2020 with Donald Trump, and we can watch what we watched here recently with the most latest debate. He's slipped. He just has. He's an older man. He's having trouble walking. He's having trouble moving around. He's having trouble forming thoughts. You can just admit this truth. Multiple things can be true. Now, none of those things improve Donald Trump, the candidate, but it improves Donald Trump, the candidate's chances of winning this election. And if you don't think Donald Trump is the favorite right now, you are kidding yourself. He is. He has a ceiling on his support, but that ceiling isn't going anywhere, and his core people aren't going anywhere. And like we said before, Biden's problem probably isn't so much people defecting to Trump. It's that people are going to look at Biden and just not vote for him. They'll split their tickets. They'll just stay home. They'll write in a third party, whatever. Biden can't afford to lose people like that because Trump isn't going to lose his base no matter what he does. We've proven that over and over and over again. So a lot can still happen. But this freak out over it, step back. Biden's in real danger of losing this election. Trump is probably the favorite. That's the first thing to take away. There's a lot of time left to go, and nobody can shoot themselves in the foot like Trump and his team can. So there is a chance that Biden can still pull this out. But he's not getting any younger. He's not going to get any cognitively closer, and he's not going to erase the images of that debate unless he never happens again. And part of the one thing Lewis put up is saying he had one bad night is one thing. If it happens again, he's toast. Because now it's going to be reinforced so much that you're not going to be able to talk anybody into voting for it. I might be wrong here too. I have joked publicly on Twitter, you can look it up, that, even Biden in a coma could probably beat Donald Trump because so many people dislike Trump. Remember, Trump only gets about 24% of the voting electorate support even when he won. That's all he got. These elections have been close. Biden only won by 40-some thousand votes in 3 distinct states, or he's not president. And before you think that sounds bad, Trump only beat Hillary by about 80,000 votes in about 4 specific states to make it work. You're going to have some states that are close enough that this thing could go either way, even with all the hot mess that's going on. But some dynamic in this race is going to have to change. You can freak out if you want to, but just look at the data, take a step back, and pay attention to what's really going on. And what's really going on right now is, even as bad as that debate looked, Trump could still blow this. But Trump is the favorite because Biden, who has been tagged with he's too old to serve, now has a whole lot of video to back up that claim. And it's going to be a very steep hill to climb to overcome that. More Heard Tell right after this. Back to Heard Tell. Let's talk about the Supreme Court decision on the Trump immunity for just a minute, because, look, I do it all the time at Ordinary Times, and I'm really proud of it. We put the Supreme Court decisions and court decisions right in there. PDF. You can even search them and just kind of zip through them and cliff notes them and say you read it. That's better than most people do. But you need to read these things for yourself. Look, guys, I'm not that, intelligent. I'm not a lawyer, although we have a lot of lawyers on staff with Ordinary Times. And I have, friends that are lawyers, and I reach out to them like, hey, explain this to me like I'm 5, because I need it explained to me like I'm 5. And they, oblige me and talk about it. And there's different people that have wrote about this, but instead of just digging through this and opining on it, I'm going to read you some of the consents. I'm going to read you some of what Chief Justice Roberts wrote as the opinion of the court. By the way, the opinion of the court is just the majority opinion. That's just a term of, how they phrase it if you're not familiar with reading Supreme Court stuff. And I'm going to read some of the dissents, and I'm going to read a part of one of the consents that was also objectionable. I just want to read a few of these because I bet you've not heard them, because the talking heads don't talk about the words unless they just nitpicking out the little things. You've probably heard, that Justice Sotomayor talked about SEAL Team 6. Can't even say it. By the way, it's not called SEAL Team 6 technically anymore. It's Dev Group. But, Anywho, let me start with Chief Justice Roberts. This is quoting from the piece. This is on ordinary-times.com. If you just Google it, it'll come right up. We're going to put the links in the show notes. If you got iTunes, there's no links in your things. You can go to heardtell.substack.com. We'll have all this stuff laid out for you. Read it for yourself. But these are some of the key parts. Chief Justice Roberts. As for the dissents, they strike a tone of chilling doom that is wholly disproportionate to what the court actually does today. Conclude that immunity extends to official discussions between the president and his attorney general, and that remaining to the lower courts to determine, quote, in the first instance, whether and to what extent Trump's remaining alleged conduct is entitled to immunity. And there's a break here because I'm not going to go through all the sides. One of the things that makes it look worse than it is when you're reading a Supreme Court or even an appellate ruling or whatever, they put the citations right in line of the sentences, so it looks a lot busier and messier than it is to the untrained eye. When we put this up at Ordinary Times, M. Carpenter, when she does her review, she'll actually put in there like, look, we took the citations out just to make it readable, but the citations are in there. There's a break, and then this is kind of the key part of what Chief Justice Roberts wrote, quoting him from the review. This case poses a question of lasting significance. When may a former president be prosecuted for official acts taken during his presidency? Our nation has never before needed an answer. But in addressing, this is Roberts' words, not mine, don't get mad at me, quoting Chief Roberts. But in addressing the question today, unlikely the political branches and the public at large, we cannot afford to fixate exclusively or even primarily on present exigencies. I'm probably saying that word wrong. Chief Justice Roberts is smarter than me. But in addressing the question why, in a case like this, focusing on, quote, transient results may have profound consequences for the separation of powers and for the future of our republic. Our perspective must be more farsighted, for the, quote, peculiar circumstances of the moment may render a measure more or less wise, but cannot render it more or less constitutional, quoting Chief Justice Marshall. Our first president had a perspective in this. In his farewell address, George Washington reminded the nation that, and quote, A government as much vigor as is consistent with the perfect security of liberty is indispensable. A government, quote, too feeble to withstand the enterprise of factions, he warned, could lead to, quote, frightful despotism of alternate domination of one factor over the other, sharpened by the spirit of revenge. And the way to avoid that cycle, he explained, was to ensure that the government powers remain properly disputed and adjusted. In these enduring principles that guide our decision in this case, the president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law, but Congress may not criticize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution. And the system of separated powers designed by the framers has always demanded an energetic, independent executive. The president, therefore, may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, and he is entitled, at a minimum, to a presumed immunity from prosecution for all of his official acts. That immunity applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party. Concurring, this is what Justice Thomas wrote, respecting the protections of the Constitution provides the office of the presidency secures liberty. In that same vein, the Constitution also secures liberty by the separating the powers to create and fill offices. And therefore, there are serious questions whether the Attorney General has violated structure by creating an office of the special counsel that has not been established by law. Those questions must be answered before this prosecution can proceed. We must respect the Constitution's separation of powers in all its form, else we risk rendering its protection of liberty a parchment guarantee. Justice Amy Coney Barrett concurred in part, but this is the part where she did not concur. Justice Barrett, quoting, I appreciate the court's concern that allowing into evidence official acts for which the president cannot be held criminally liable may prejudice the jury. But the rules of evidence are equipped to handle that concern on a case-by-case basis. Most importantly, a trial court can exclude evidence of the president's protected conduct, quote, if a prohibited value is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice or confusing of the issues. The balance is more likely to favor admitting evidence of an official act in a bribery prosecution, for instance, than one in which the protected conduct has little connection in the charged offense. And if the evidence comes in, the trial court can instruct the jury to see it. I see no need to depart from that familiar and time-tested procedure here. Justice Sotomayor, who wrote the primary dissent here, quote, Justice Sotomayor here, the majority's single-minded fixation on the president's need for boldness and dispatch ignores the countervailing need for accountability and restraint. The framers were not so single-minded. In the Federalist Papers, after endeavoring to show that the executive designed by the Constitution, quote, combines all the requisites to energy, Alexander Hamilton asked a separate, equally important question. Quote, does it also combine the requisites to safety in a Republican sense, a due dependence on the people, a due responsibility? That's Federalist number 77, just for you citation folks. You go read it for yourself. Back to Justice Sotomayor. The answer then was yes, based on part of the president's vulnerability to prosecution in the common course of law. The answer after today is now no. Never in the history of our republic has a president had reason to believe that he would be immune from criminal prosecution if he used the trappings of his office to violate the criminal law. Moving forward, however, all former presidents will be cloaked in such immunity. If the occupant of that office misuses official power for personal gain, the criminal law that the rest of us must abide will not provide a backstop. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. Lastly, I want to read from Justice Jackson's dissent. And frankly, I think this is the best written thing on this whole argument. I think she has real wisdom here. I understand what the court is doing. I understand John Roberts' argument. I don't particularly like it. I think it's way too broad. I think especially the immunity part where you can't even, take into evidence things that might have been immune as evidence to other things. That seems really broad. But again, this is going to go to the lower court and we're going to figure out what's official and unofficial acts. And remember, take the Trump part out of this. This is a Trump case, but this is going to apply to every president going forward until the Supreme Court changes it. Listen to what Justice Jackson writes here. The majority of my colleagues seem to have put their trust in our court's ability to prevent presidents from becoming kings through case-by-case application of the indeterminate standards of the new presidential accountability paradigm. I fear they are wrong, but for all our sakes, I hope they are right. I agree with Justice Jackson. I think, especially the Roberts Court, if it had a theme, it was Congress needs to handle things. The executive has too much power. The administrative state has too much power. Congress is supposed to fix these things. We're not the referees to fix these things. We're not supposed to fix the lower courts. We're going to send this to the lower courts to fix. That's been the theme of the Roberts Court. I can't read Chief Justice Roberts' mind, and I'm not a lawyer. But I've read a lot of his work, and I've seen what he's done from the bench. I think he sees this as something that the court will adjudicate on a case-by-case basis going forward, like Justice Jackson, like Justice Barrett has talked about in their consents and dissents. I don't think he's completely right, though. I don't think he fully sees what this is going to do down the line. I think he sees the court in the way, very structural and correctly on paper, as just the adjudicators of the law before them. And that's what the Supreme Court's designed to do. To be fair to Justice Roberts, the Supreme Court is not designed to fix an out-of-balance Congress and an out-of-balance executive. But that's what's being called upon to do here, because you have an executive in President Trump who's not going to play by the rules. So that's really the core of this argument. Should the court go beyond what it's supposed to do by the letter of the law to stop somebody who is clearly not caring about the letter of the law? All these debates really boil down to that. I'd like to tell you I had a good answer for that, but I don't. We'll see what happens. Please read these documents for yourself. We will link to them. More Heard Tell right after this. Welcome back to Heard Tell. Now, we've been talking about the freakout over the Supreme Court. We've been talking about the freakout over the debate. One thing we haven't mentioned a whole lot about is, and I find this somewhat perplexing, is how all this has kind of been caused. I'm a root cause guy. I'm a data guy. I see what's happening, but once I have my initial reaction, I want to know why it happened. One of our core principles on this program is that things don't happen in a vacuum. They happen in a sequence. How did we get here? Everybody wants to talk about the double haters, and everybody talks about all these, stories after stories like, well, nobody really wants either of these candidates. Well, that didn't just happen. You didn't just wind up with Trump v. Biden 2. There was a process. There was primaries. People elected them. People voted for them. You can debate about the role of the parties. The Republican Party couldn't control Trump in 2016, and he basically took them over. The Democratic Party tried to clear the field for Hillary and probably caused Trump to win. You can debate that one on your own time later. And then they rallied around Joe Biden when it looked like they walked up to the cliff, saw what a Bernie Sanders nomination might look like, and they ran, not walked to the polls for Joe Biden, and the rest is history. None of that just happened. It happened in a sequence. People are complaining about the Supreme Court and the way they're ruling on how Trump has behaved and the Trump charges. Well, that didn't just happen in the process either. I want to proffer something to you. I want to pitch you a theory. I want to just give you something to think about here in the guise of kind of the theme of this current program of don't freak out, just figure out what's going on. The Supreme Court has outsized influence in our government system right now. Why? Who the president of the United States is has outside influence in our politics right now. Why? If you read the founding documents, if you read the Federalist Papers, if you read the private letters of the men who actually put this system of government together, they never intended the president to be the primary head of the government. He's the executive of the government. He runs it. Maybe a good way to say this is like, Disney, the brand should be bigger than who the president of Disney is. If the president of Disney is making more headlines than the brand Disney, that's probably bad for business, right? Kind of the same theory. It's not a perfect analogy, but just to pick something like Disney is a big brand. If you know who the president of Disney is, it's probably because he did something bad or business isn't good or there's a controversy or something like that. You really shouldn't know who that guy is. The presidency has become this really big, super important, overblown thing because it brings a lot of power and money to other people. the fundraising aspects, the political power aspects. The party system, of course, is built around lately superstar candidates for president, and then you hope it trickles down to everybody else. Everybody below the president wants to be president. The president's supposed to drag everybody up, so on and so forth. You could go around in a circle for a long time about all this. The whole key to it, though, is the president is way more oversized than he really should be. But why? How did that happen? Congress has never been weaker than it's ever been before. It's more divided than it's been in a long time. You can argue about, how vitriol and stuff. Like, look, we've had people almost beaten to death on the floor of the Senate before. Okay, so we've had civil wars. So don't go overboard on it. But yeah, Congress is really divided. It's very dysfunctional. Why? Our entire system of government, I just want to pitch this to you and think about it as you see these headlines roll by. A lot of what's going on with the Supreme Court and with the presidency and with Congress is because our entire system of government is out of balance right now. Congress is the part of the federal government we, the people, have the most control over. We vote on every single member of Congress every 2 years, a third of the Senate, give or take, about every 2 years. We have power over them. And yet, that's the branch of government we usually exercise the least amount of power over. It has very little turnover for the amount of elections they have. You have congressmen that are there forever. You have senators that die in office of old age. No disrespect to them, but that's not healthy. Let's just be honest here. If we're going to beat up Joe Biden for being too old to be president, things like what they did to Dianne Feinstein is just criminal. People should have gone to jail for that kind of treatment of somebody who clearly wasn't fit for office, but got wheeled in and out of their office anyway so that people could hold on to their jobs and power. That's despicable. And Republicans have done that too over the years, but you get the idea. The system's out of balance because Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse, not just the president saying, give me money for this, and they get it. Congress is supposed to have oversight over the judicial and the executive branches, but usually they're doing big committee meetings over hot button cultural issues so that they can get good fundraising and they can all get reelected or try to get over to the Senate or try to run for president themselves or run for governor or whatever next job they want. The Senate is supposed to be the, more quote unquote mature body because they have longer terms and are supposed to be a little more august or whatever term you want to use. But they've kind of given in because the joke is that, every senator wants to be president. We usually have 5 or 6 run every time we have a presidential cycle because they all think they should be president. They're not really doing their jobs either. The theme of the Roberts Court, as we've already talked about, is over and over and over again. If you read a lot of these Supreme Court, especially on stuff like regulatory issues, things like this, over and over and over again, the Supreme Court is screaming at anybody that wants to listen, like Congress is supposed to do this. This isn't our job. We're not supposed to legislate, although they effectively do by fiat. This is Congress's job. Congress is messed up. So more pressure gets put on the Supreme Court to try to clean up Congress's messes. Even that immunity claim, it's written right there in the thing. Like, hey, Congress is supposed to be doing this, not us. And if you want to complain about the Supreme Court, remember how we get Supreme Court justices. You elect a president, and the Senate advises and consents and votes and approves them. All these branches of government are supposed to be working together in a balance with clearly delineated powers, and that's all been out of the window for quite a while. So if you want to talk about why the headlines are chaos, why the political system's chaos, why everybody's freaking out, start with the fact that our system of government has been out of balance for some time. The Supreme Court has too much power because Congress doesn't do their job. The executive have too much power because Congress doesn't do its job. The Supreme Court is overreaching on things because Congress isn't reeling them in. Congress can impeach a sitting Supreme Court justice, right? We've not seen it happen in recent memory, but it could happen. Congress can impeach a president. We know that because they went after Trump twice. We know the Clinton stuff. The political answer to all this stuff is Congress's power through us, the people, to impeach those other 2 branches and to oversight them if we want to. They're not using that power. Maybe they should. We should probably kick some more people out of Congress once in a while just to keep them all honest as well. So as those headlines whirl by, just keep in mind that the overall picture is the entirety of our government is out of balance right now. But once you do that and understand it's out of balance, before you complain about Washington, understand who really has the power over it. If we quit donating money, if we vote people out, if we'd have a little more righteous indignation as voters and quit tolerating this nonsense, a lot of it would stop. And until it does, that means we're not serious about stopping it. So before we place blame on the Supreme Court and on the president and on Congress, We got to find a mirror and put it on ourselves. It's a representative government. We get the government we deserve most of the time. So if it's chaos out there, we deserve it unless we do something about it. More Heard Tell right after this. Welcome back to Heard Tell. So we've been kind of banging on all the big national stories here. Let's talk about something you can do that's more productive. What are you doing on the local level? There's been a lot of stuff about like people that go to school board meetings and give speeches. That's well and good. You can go to a county commission meeting and speak. That's well and good too. But have you ever thought about running for office? Have you ever thought about serving on a commission? Have you ever thought about getting involved with another candidate and their thing? And look, on the national level, I don't donate money to politicians, especially on the national level, because you don't know where that money's going. Most of that's slush funds, especially these PACs. A lot of them, what you're really doing is paying people to go to fancy dinners and lunches and write it off and that sort of thing. I'm not interested in funding anybody's lifestyle. Locally, though, why not support a candidate financially if you're not going to run yourself? You would be shocked if you would look at the statistics of elected offices where people just run unopposed. There's elected offices where people don't run at all. There's been cases where there's been things even like on the state level, like House of Delegates level or state Senate or Assembly or whatever they call it in your state, where just nobody's even ran against somebody for quite a while from one or the other parties or even as an independent. You don't like both political parties? Help build a new political party. I know that sounds a little Pollyannish pie in the sky, but why not? Been third parties before. Go start one. Run as an independent. Support independent candidates if you don't like either of the political parties. If you don't like the political party you're part of, have you tried to go through the machinations to try to change some of it? Now, again, on the national level, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do about that. On the local level, though, well, those committees are pretty small. They're probably people you already know if you're involved in your community whatsoever. And if you don't know who's involved in your local community, well, that's kind of shame on you, right? Have you looked locally? One of the things we talk about with everybody freaking out here, if everybody's freaking out nationally, once again, swim against the current, you usually find something going on. What's going on locally? Have you gotten involved in your local politics? Because a lot of the local politics, I know people trickle down from the national stuff and they talk about, some of the hot button cultural issues, but a lot of it's roads. A lot of it's funding for things like parks. A lot of it's like, should we have a splash pad instead of the swimming pool that costs a lot of money? Should we do a hiking trail? How are we going to zone for this big supermarket chain that wants to go in next to this school system, but there's residential neighborhoods? These are important issues. They're also politics. We don't think of politics that way. We've gotten into this culture war stuff where we think politics is all who's running for president and what's the hottest button issue that's trending. Politics really is people trying to figure out how to govern themselves in a representative democracy, and that involves a lot of local stuff like, are the storm drains cleaned out before the flood comes? Are the roads paved? Potholes? Are we going to fund the library? What should a library be in the digital age? Should it be a computer center or should it be a book repository? That's a legitimate argument we should be having on the local level with funding. What do our school systems look like post-COVID? That's a debate we should be having. Those are all local politics things. Now, you can get all ate up with the national stuff and then show up at the school board meetings and the county commission meetings or the city council meetings, whatever applies to you. And you can just spout off and read. I always get cracked up people reading off their phones, their talking points. But if you're going to get upset at the national stuff without getting involved on the local level or at least keep up with what's going on, that's a problem. And it's a you problem. That's not the media's fault. That's your fault. One of the reasons I went back to writing locally, and I've got, the new gig starting in August where I'm going to be writing regular commentary for West Virginia Watch. I've got a good relationship with Fayette Tribune where I'm going to be writing more with them as well. I needed that grounding because I'm guilty of this too. I just get caught up in all the national stuff and I'm burnt out on it and I don't like it. And I don't like who I am covering it and I don't like what they're doing. And it's good to go back and write about a waterfall or write about a local concert or write about a hiking trail or write about things that I actually care about. Yeah, they don't go viral. Yeah, they probably don't get as much reads, but they matter. And then when you get a really big, important local story like the Kennedy Miller thing, and if you're not familiar with that story, that's a 14-year-old girl who literally starved to death. Her mother and grandparents that she lived with are now on trial, but both CPS and the state troopers had contact with this child. Nothing was done. And then the government of West Virginia, the state government, absolutely botched the information rollout after it happened and made it look like they were covering stuff up, and whether they were or not, we're still working on. But when big stories hit like that, you have your foot on the ground and your ear to the ground on what's going on locally, and you stay grounded. If you're just chasing national headlines all the time and just complaining about Washington, D.C. all the time, mostly you're expending a whole lot of effort without actually accomplishing anything. Get involved in the local level. You're not going to win all the time. You'll win some battles, lose some battles, but you'll have an effect, and you'll get to see that effect. I bet you that'll change your attitude about politics when you put a little skin in the game. Now, not everybody can run for office, nor should they, but everybody could be involved at the local level, or at least civically with a civic organization, or get involved with something your kids are doing, local sports stuff. Civic organizations have really fallen off in America. Go find one. Do some, like, you can't do anything else. Find the nearest VA and volunteer. They will take you, guarantee it. They'll take all the volunteers they can get. It'll change your mind on how certain things are run. Go volunteer for something. Go be part of a parade. Go be part of a festival in town. Something. Be a part of your community. Way too many people are getting in their missile silos of their home, and all they're looking straight up at the sky. They just see this narrow little circle that's based on their media consumption. That's unhealthy for them. That's unhealthy for the country. It doesn't do your community any good. Get out, get involved. Don't just yell at DC. They can't hear you anyway, and it's just hurting yourself. Just some friendly advice. Doesn't cost you anything. Here on Heard Tell. More in a moment. Welcome back to Heard Tell. Let's end on a good note because we've been, not a lot of happy talk today. BlackEnterprise.com down in Atlanta. Nikki Crawford was helping Atlanta's growing homeless population by providing access to basic human necessities. With the help of Georgia Tech engineering students, Crawford turned a school bus into a mobile laundry facility. We're going to link to this. This has got a really good video in it. Quote, Crawford revealed the laundry bus at the Juneteenth block party on Wednesday. He partnered with other organizations, including the Morehouse School of Medicine Initiative, Policy Alternatives and Diversions Initiative, the Department of Veteran Affairs, and local barbers. What we're trying to do is get them clothes they can have for weeks so they can change clothes, because a lot of the times it's not them that smells, it's actually their clothes, Crawford told ABC 11. In 2022, Crawford unveiled a mobile shower for the homeless community located behind Grady Hospital. That's a big hospital in Atlanta. The 3-stalled trailer has sinks, toilets, and showers that serve at least 50 people a week. Crawford also provides towels, toiletries, undergarments, and socks for its guests. Quote, when you actually sit down and talk to them, it's just like a family member. A family member has been through a rough time, so we can all do something. Maybe not this, but we can all do something to help the unhoused in the area, he told Atlanta's WSB-TV. The retired administrator said he believed his life's mission is to help the homeless and unhoused community. God has blessed me so much, Crawford said. I knew this is what I was supposed to be doing. He founded Flowering with Blessings, a nonprofit organization that assists the unhousing community with basic needs such as haircuts, showers, health checks, and meals. We believe every person deserves to feel clean, comfortable, and valued, he said. With our services, we aim to empower those facing homelessness and help them rebuild their lives with dignity. We're going to add a link if you want to see what this organization, Flowering with Blessings, is about. We'll click on that. You want to support them, great. Love talking to living legends that do stuff like this. Something like just doing your laundry is one of those things that a lot of people take for granted. Look, if you're on the internet and you're listening to this through your smartphone, you have running water in your house, you have air conditioning, you have a car to drive, you have a roof over your head, you're in the 1% of a lot of the world as far as wealth and comfort goes. Make sure we're taking care of those less fortunate with us with whatever we can, however we can. Doesn't cost you anything to donate your time, if nothing else. Help people in your community. happy to end on a good note. Bless this man. We'll link to his organization if you want to help them out. That'll do it for Heard Tell today. Thank you so much for giving us the most precious thing you have, your time. However you're listening, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, there's been some consolidation on platforms. Amazon shut theirs down. However you're finding us, do us a favor. Make sure you're following and subscribed or whatever terminology that platform use, even on multiple platforms. If you use Spotify, if you use iTunes, do it on all those. And if they leave an option for a comment and a rating, please do that for us. It's really important because that lets them know that we're worth getting a little bump on their algorithms. I'm sorry, that's just the world we live in. If you could leave us a note, that'd be great. Plus, we'll see it, and it's nice to know that you're out there listening. You want to contact us directly, Heard Tell Show at Twitter, heardtellshow@gmail.com. You can send us an email. YouTube channel. We've been fighting with YouTube. We did a migration where it pulled a lot of our old stuff onto the new podcasting tab. And for some reason, YouTube decided to mark a bunch of it as community strikes, which is ridiculous because this is stuff that's already been on YouTube for years. We're fighting with them, but right now we can't actually upload anything. By the time you hear this, we should be able to upload stuff again. We're trying to get it worked out. This is just the age we live in, folks. So do us a favor, give us a good review on YouTube. Share that link with folks if you want to watch the videos. You can also listen to just the podcast portion on YouTube as well. A lot of people do that. I do that. I listen to podcasts on YouTube all the time. If you want to use that platform, make sure you leave us a note. Let us know. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Heard Tell Show, on that. And that'll do it for Heard Tell. Wherever you and yours are, across the street or around the world, we hope you're well. We hope you are well fed, and we cannot wait to talk to you again for more Heard Tell. Take care.
All the music on Heard Tell is provided under a Creative Content license from monstercat.com.
Somos la máquina.